Hello and welcome to this session on what's new in Business Central from the 2023 Release Wave 1 from April and Release Wave 2 from October. In this session we've picked some highlights from both release waves that we're going to talk through. If you have any questions whilst we're going through these, please feel free to pop them into the question pane in the Teams webinar, and then at the end of the session, if there's time, we will go through and try and answer some of them. If not, we will get back in contact with you if you leave your name or your email address and answer those as a follow-up. We carry out these webinars a couple of times a year, and we've got 4 or 5 years worth of history now. So if you want to look back at the previous webinars to see what's new in previous versions, feel free to go to our YouTube, search for DC, Dynamics Consultant, hit the subscribe button, and you'll also find a large number of other useful videos all about Business Central and the Power Platform on our YouTube channel. So what we've got here is our official charts, top 40 favourite features from Business Central Release Wave 1 and 2 2023. And we cover features from various elements of the systems. We've got some from the general features and functions, some from financials, inventory, warehousing and multi-company. If you're quick with your maths, you'll see those don't add up to 40 though. You'll be glad to know there's only 33 highlights that we'll be going through in this session. So to start with, we're going to look at the general improvements, and this will be some of the changes to the user interface and the enhancements being made to it, the search and data functionality, analyze and pivot, business event triggers, and the enhanced mail merge. Right, let's dive into the solution and start showing you some of these new features. We're going to quickly run through some amendments that Microsoft have made to the user interface in Business Central. It's important to note that Microsoft are constantly monitoring telemetry in the background, so they see how users are using the system. If they find that users are carrying out a number of clicks to carry out a particular task, they'll look at ways in which they can rearrange the interface to improve things. And a lot of the changes that you see coming out in each release wave are based on the telemetry that they are picking up on and analysing from everyone's systems. So the first thing is they've changed the tabs at the top, so they've made it easier for you to see where you're working in Business Central. So if we look at the series of tabs across the top here, you can see that I've got this little Crow DIS and over here Crow UK. So these are based on the company badges. So these company badges you set up in the company information page. And then once you set one up, it will by default, if you're on a main screen, it will show you which particular company you're in when you're looking at the tabs, and also will show you on the tabs which page you're in and which record you're in. So here I can see I'm on the customer card for Customer 1000, the Darton Corporation, and I'm in Cronus UK. So you see the information, it's all in the little drop down window. So again, it's easier if you've got hundreds of tabs open, it's very quick and easy now to flick through and see what information is on which tab rather than closing them all and reopening them. We're now going to flick across to a sales order. Now, another thing they've done is they realised that a lot of times if you're in the drop down, such as on this sales order here, you're looking at the item number. If you want to see more information about one of the drop downs, so in this case it's the item list, previously you had to go to the full list, you had to go to the list and then select the edit card option, I think it was. What they've now done, they realised everyone was clicking multiple times to see a particular piece of information. In these drop down lists, you now have a show details, so it's a single click. So from the drop down, you can click on show details and it will then open up the card of the related record. So again, the whole point of this is to save you multiple clicks to get to the piece of information you require. Historically, if you need to add additional fields to a page which are already on the table, you've had to employ a developer to do it. So it's either been an in-house developer or contacting DC or your other partners to ask them to add fields to pages. Microsoft have made some additional modifications now, which means that you can customize a profile within Business Central, and from the customizing profile functionality, you can add any existing field from a table onto a page. So from the search here, I'm going to search for profiles, open up a role, and I'm using the Business Manager Evaluation role here. So I'll click on that one, and I can then customize the pages. This opens up a new tab that allows me to customize any page in the system. And when I finish the customizations and save it, it will update this particular profile. So the idea behind this is you can go through each individual profile in your company that you're using and modify the pages more. It gives you more flexibility to modify what you can see. So we're going to go into the item card here. I'm going to open it up. And I'll go and look at the Athens desk as an example. Now, you've already got all these existing fields here. I now have the option under Add Field that you've got an All Fields option. It's currently in preview, which means it might change slightly before it's finally released, but it should be there in any version 23 environment. So if you click on the drop down, you've also got options here where you can remove the fields you can see. So you can see base objects, extension fields. You can remove fields that are already on the page so you don't see them in the list. But what I have here is a complete list, and it shows you in a little icon here whether the field is currently visible on your page or not. So if I can pick any field that's on the table. So maybe, for instance, I want to include the block reason code. So I can take the block reason code, I can drag it across, and I can then drop it down there below the blocked field. So I've added that field on. Historically, you couldn't do that very easily. You had to go through and modify the object. So once I've done that, another thing they've added in the customization of profiles is you can also change the editability of fields. So historically in Business Central, you've not been able to restrict the ability to edit a particular field on a page. You can't do it via security permissions now, but you can do it via the profile. So it might be that you've got two different roles in your company. Let's say you've got a customer service role and you've got an inventory management role. And you want to stop the customer services role from being able to edit particular fields on a record that they can normally edit, but a particular field you want to restrict them. So what you can do is you can hover over a particular field here in the customization screen, click on the drop down, and there's a lock editing option. And if you click that, that field then comes grayed out, and it means that anyone using this current profile will no longer be able to edit that particular field. So I think, again, those two things together are very useful to help you improve the way in which you're presenting the system to your end users and making it more easy for them to use. Okay, let's go on to the next bits then. One of the things that has been traditionally very hard to do in Business Central is to find a piece of information if you don't know where to look for it. So in this latest version, Microsoft have released a new search functionality that allows you to search throughout the data in the entire system. So rather than just looking within the list you're in, or rather than looking for a particular page, you can search for a piece of data. So for instance, if I want to search for Alpine ski house, I can then click on search company data, and it will look for every single transaction and record in the system that relates to that particular piece of data. It then sorts it based on the type of data. So here we've got contacts. I can see the two contacts I've got relating to that particular company. I can see the customer. I can see all the customer ledger entry. So individual transactions. I can see posted sales invoices. And you can easily change the tables that you wish to search in. So by clicking here, you can say which tables you want to include. So if there are tables that aren't included as standard, you can extend it, and likewise you can also remove tables. This is very good if, for instance, you've got a customer services team who need to search and find a piece of information very quickly. They can take a reference number from a customer and it will automatically go through and find anything that relates to that particular reference number. Most people are familiar with analysing data in Excel. It's something which we've all grown up with and very used to taking data out from an existing system and then producing charts or pivoting the data and analysing it in different ways. So what Microsoft have done in the latest version, they've released something called analysis and pivot views. So if you go to a standard list in Business Central, so this is the posted sales invoice list, you can see there's now a toggle here, and this toggle is on any list in Business Central. When we click that, we move into the Analyze view. Now, currently it's just a list of all the invoices like we saw previously, but what we can do is we can select fields and then start grouping the data. So for instance, I can take the customer name and drag it down into the row groups down there, and it's then summarized all of those invoices by the customer name. I can then take it further, for instance, and say I would like to analyze it by customer name, then by due date year and due date month. And then if I extend one of these, you'll see that I've got the customer name, and then I can drill down to the year and then to the individual months. And with this analysis view, you can then see how many invoices there are within each of the groupings. So there's 6 in January, as well as total value. So here we've got the summation of the amount, and you can determine which fields you want to include. So I can just remove these ones I don't want and just have the sum amount there. Furthermore, you also have the ability to enter pivot mode. So here there's now a pivot mode action. So if I turn on pivot mode, I can then say what I want to do is analyze my outstanding sales invoices by bill to country region code, and I can drag that up into the column labels up here. And now I've got a summing by country code. and I can then summarize that by year. So here I then got per year due, the amount that's outstanding currently by country code. There's lots of things you can do with this. You can save the views, you can copy them, you can share links to them. It's just a way of saving you from extracting the data from Business Central and moving it into Excel. Going forwards, they're also planning on extending this feature so you can have your own queries built, which is a little bit of development, but it's quite simple. So a query built that enables you to analyze vast volumes of data very quickly within Business Central. The next thing I'd like to show is to do with the Power Platform. Microsoft have been increasing the interconnectivity between Business Central and the various elements of the Power Platform over the last couple of years. And they're just introducing the latest version, something called business events. So business events are triggers that occur within Business Central. So when something occurs in Business Central, you can then trigger something to happen outside of Business Central. I've created a very simple flow here, which literally took me about 5 minutes to create. And in this flow, I do something very simple. I say, when a customer is blocked in Business Central, I want to send an email to a person. It could be a person, it could be a group, it could be the salesperson for that customer, but I'm just sending a copy of it to myself. So in Power Automate, there is now this new trigger from Business Central called when a business event occurs. And out of the box, there are about a dozen, 15 maybe, different triggers. So when a customer is blocked or unblocked, opportunities are won or lost, etc. These are just the standard ones that are out of the box. We can hook into anything that happens in Business Central. So for instance, if you want to trigger something to happen when a particular field is filled in or with a particular value, we can build an event that triggers that. And then once you've got that event created, you can create a Power Automate flow that hooks off the back of it. So in this instance, when a customer is blocked, for each time that a customer is blocked, I want to go off and retrieve the customer record. So it knows that something's happened. It needs to go off then and get that customer record. And then once I've got the customer record, I want to send an email to myself as the administrator. And all the email says is, please be aware that the customer, and then I use the customer name that I've retrieved, has been blocked for the type of blocking, whether it's shipping, invoicing, or all transactions. So very simple. So I'll then go back into Business Central. I'll go and open up one of my customers, the top one, the Darton Corporation. I click in there and we've got the blocked field. Now here we've got three different values, so ship, invoice, or all. I'm going to select ship. And when I've selected that, that will then trigger in the background this business event. And I can see that a little red dot's appeared in my inbox there to show that I've got a new email. So it's instantaneous basically. And there's the email I've got. Please be aware that the customer at Darton Corporation has been blocked for ship transactions. Likewise, I could change that to say all transactions. If I give it a moment, that then triggers another flow that's appeared to say that they've now been blocked for all transactions. So it's a simple scenario here where it's taken me 5 minutes to create a very basic flow, but it saves someone in your admin team or your accounts receivable team the time that it takes to send out an email notifying people when customers have been blocked. The next feature I want to show, I'm just going to cover with a couple of slides. This is the enhanced mail merge feature. Microsoft have introduced this new functionality. Well, it's saying new. It's been around in previous incarnations, but they've reintroduced it and they've beefed it up a little bit. And it allows you to create mail merge Word documents. So these are primarily based on three sets of records: the customers, the vendors, and the contacts. You have the ability to set up multiple additional tables that are both related to those records and also unrelated. So for instance, in the screenshot on the screen, you can see that I've associated the customer price group with my customer. So if I wanted to, I could include data that's specific to the customer, such as a customer price, into the document that I'm creating. I can also include additional unrelated information, such as items and the company information. So you set this up. Once you've created the basic structure of the tables, you can specify which additional fields you want to include in the export out to Word. And you can have up to 250 fields that go out to Word as mail merge fields. In this screenshot here, you can then see it in Word. So this has been exported. You get a little data file in Excel which tells Word which fields you can use for the mail merge. And then, as you do with any mail merge document, you put your text in, you include the fields that you want from Business Central, and then save that template. And once you've saved it, you re-import it back into Business Central, which then allows you to very quickly and easily generate these mail merge documents. So this is one of the examples I've generated based on the previous template I was showing. So it's a very quick, easy way to stay in contact with your customers, your vendors and your prospects directly from Business Central. The next thing I like to show is the effective permissions. So when you're building a permission set for your employees or the people using Business Central, sometimes you're trying to work out why someone's got access to something which you think they shouldn't have. And it might be that they've got a particular permission set which has given them an additional permission you didn't expect. So this new effective permissions page allows you to open it, specify a user, and by default anyone can see their own permissions. So I can log in if I'm not a super user, I can still go and view my specific permissions. But if I'm a super user or if I've got the security permission sets, I can run this for other users as well. And what happens when you run the page is it shows you a list of all the pages and the data that you've got access to in Business Central. And once you click on that particular piece of data, for instance the job, which is I've got highlighted in this screenshot here, it shows you where that permission is coming from. So in this case it's coming from the D365 Business Premium, but potentially it could be coming from multiple different permission sets, and they're then displayed at the bottom of the table. So you can easily go in, see where people are inheriting their permissions from, and then make adjustments as you require. Okay, let's move on to the next area. This is going to be the financials. So we're going to look at four key things: the new review GL accounts functionality, the introduction of none and partial deductible VAT, amendments to the invoice posting policy, and statistical accounts and how they can be used in GL allocations. So the first of those was the review GL accounts. This is a new feature that allows you to set individual GL accounts to allow review of the entries against those accounts, and also to allow reviewing based on a match of the balance that you are reviewing. So for instance, if you have individual transactions and there are debits and credits, you can specify that they have to balance when you mark them as reviewed. So let's flip into Business Central and have a quick look at this functionality. So here we are in Business Central. I'm going to go to my chart of accounts, and then I'm going to select accounts and transactions. So in this case, it's the sale of finished goods account. It doesn't matter which account we're using for this example. And on the general tab, there's review policy, where this is currently set to none. You can set to allow review, which means you can tick each individual transaction in isolation if you so wish, and allow review and match balance, which, as I said earlier, means you have to match it up from a debit and a credit perspective. So we just say allow review to this. We come out of the GL account card. And now there's an option from the home button, home action up here, to review entries. So when you click on review entries, it opens up another little page where you can see the individual transactions that are posted against that GL account. And then you can select the ones you want. So I'm going to hold down control and select several entries here to say that I'm happy with them. Once you've got some selected and this little column's appeared here, you can tick what you want. When you're happy with that and you're happy to review the transactions, you can then select them as reviewed. And this box is then ticked to say it's been reviewed, and then also stamped here to say that they've been reviewed by myself, the administrator, and when they were reviewed. So it's a quick, simple way to allow you to go through, if you need to review individual general ledger entry transactions. Now let's go back to the slide deck for a few more new features. So the next new feature is non-deductible and partly deductible VAT. So this needs to be enabled and set up in the system. And when it's set up, it allows you the ability to determine how you want to handle partially deductible VAT. So you can decide whether you want to include the elements of VAT which you can't reclaim as part of the item cost, the fixed asset cost if it's associated with that, and job costs as well. You need to do a bit of setup. There's creation of new VAT posting groups, a new VAT setup. And then when you go through and you transact something which has a partially deductible VAT, you can see on the individual transactions lines, such as in a sales invoice in this example, the value that is going to go through as a non-deductible VAT. And then you can look at preview posting and it will also show you there how much VAT isn't going to be deducted. There's also this new feature for invoice posting policy. So I've been working now with Business Central and its predecessors for sort of 20 or more years, and something that very, very regularly comes up is that people want to restrict individual users' capabilities of posting invoices. So by default, if you go through and post a transaction such as a posted sales order, if you're posting a sales order, you get an option to ship an invoice or invoice it. This allows you to, on a user by user basis, to restrict the options that they've got. So in the user setup, there are two new fields, the sales invoice posting policy and the purchase invoice posting policy. And under those, there are three options. There's allowed, prohibited, and mandatory. So allowed means it stays as it is and that you get the three options appear. So in this case, this is the purchase invoice posting policy. So you can receive, you can invoice, or you can receive an invoice. If you set to prohibited, it means that the users aren't able to post an invoice, so the only option they get is to post a receipt. And if you set it to mandatory, it means that the user has to post both the receipt and the invoice at the same time. So again, nice new feature that is very welcome for those that have been using the system for a long period of time. The next one, I'll give a brief walkthrough on the slide, and then I'm going to give you a little demo within Business Central. And this is to do with statistical accounts. So statistical accounts are numerical accounts that don't have a monetary value associated with them. So it's a very simple new ledger. So for instance, it might be that you want to set up a ledger for your number of employees or your square meterage or the number of picks you carry out in a warehouse. And you can create a particular account, and then you can post very simple ledgers, ledger entries to those accounts. So you can assign them with dimensions as well. So for instance, with employees, it might be you assign a department dimension. So you can record the number of employees that you have in each dimension. This was released in Release Wave 1 this year. There's a new functionality, it's been released in Release Wave 2, that allows you to use these statistical accounts to automatically allocate when you're posting general ledger journals. So let's go and have a quick look in Business Central at these features. So I'm going to click here on my bookmark for statistical accounts. Now, if you're not aware, any page you go into in Business Central, if you use it regularly, there's a bookmark tag in the top right corner. If you click that, it will then appear on your role center at the top in the bookmark. So quick top tip for you there. Here we have two statistical accounts set up. We've got employees and office space. So let's click on employees. And as we can see in here, we've got employees and we currently have a balance of 73. So there are 73 employees at our company. And if I drill down on this flow field, you can see the transactions that have gone in to make up that number of 73. So we've got each individual transaction here, quantities, and then the department code, because I've chosen to use department code with this particular statistical account. So I can see who we have in each individual department. If you need to make a change to that, there are statistical accounts journals, and if I click on here, here's one I prepared earlier. So end of May, we're putting through a decrease for the employees statistical account, and it's the decrease in the sales staff. So I'm removing one person from my sales department. So if I'm happy with that, I can then post and register it. That's now successfully registered. If I go back to my employees tag, you can now see that I have 72 employees on that statistical account. Now that I have some statistical accounts set up, how can you use these? Under the finance and financial reporting, which used to be called account schedules, we've got an example here called revenue per employee. If I click into here, this is a financial report. It's set up to show me by month the amount from each revenue account that I've got on my chart of accounts. And if I scroll down here, you can see that I'm also pulling in some statistical account information. In this case, I'm bringing through the number of employees from my employee statistics account, and I've got a filter on it to just show me people from the sales department. And once I've got that value brought in, I can then carry out automatic calculations in these reports. So in this case, I'm showing the revenue per employee. So this is the total sales divided by the number of sales employees to give me a value there. So you can start using these to produce financial reports that analyse, for instance, sales or maybe cost overhead by number of employees or by floor space. In addition, they've also introduced the new account allocation functionality. This is in its first iteration, so we're going to have a quick look at allocations. And there are allocation accounts. Now I've set one up called rent allocated by floor space. So this is an allocation account where you can say in here, I want to split down any amounts posted to this allocation account into these general ledger accounts, and I want to use the office space statistical accounts that I've got set up to distribute the values. And I can also assign filters. So what I've done here is I've said for the administration department, any office space associated with them, I want to split out that value, and also for production and for sales. It's a little bit clunky. I think they'll probably refine this in coming versions, but you can see how it's starting to build up some useful functionality here. Once you've got an allocation account set up, you can then use those in sales and purchase documents, but also in general journals. So if I have a quick look at a general journal, and we go into the default batch, in here I've got a line I've created. So there's a new account type here called allocation account. So I've created a line against my allocation account for rent floor space. I put a value in there for £10,000, and then I can see how that's going to be split out. So if I do a preview posting and then look at the general ledger entries it's going to create, I can see that it's created lines. It's splitting out the values there based on the distribution of the floor space across each individual department. So it's breaking the £10,000 down proportionally, and then also assigning the dimension codes to it, the department code to it as well. So again, it's a little bit clunky, but I think over the next year or so, 6 months to a year, I think they'll probably introduce some refinement to make this a much more usable solution. But I think it's usable as it is. You just need to be aware that there's a few bits of additional setup and working around you might need to do. Next up, we're going to look at multi-company. So if you work in a multi-company environment where you have multiple companies or even multiple databases within your organization, there have been a number of improvements to help you with various elements of this. So within this, we have intercompany improvements, so some general improvements that I'll go through, and also a multi-environment API, which sounds very fancy and technical. And there's also some synchronization of master data that we'll have a quick look at. So the first thing I'm very glad to say is one of my ideas. So if you're not aware, Microsoft have an ideas website. So there are improvements to the product that you want to suggest, which are sort of fairly generic and not sort of industry specific. You can put an idea up, detail about what you think the improvement should be, and then people can upvote it. And Microsoft monitors constantly, and they use this as part of their roadmap for improvements to the product. So this is the third idea that I've had implemented in the system. If there are things that you think are lacking in the solution and you think could be part of the standard product, you can either add them yourselves or feel free to come to myself, one of my colleagues, and we can put them up there, and we can also upvote those ideas within DC as well. So that particular idea, the improvement was to allow bank transactions to be handled. So if you're multi-company, quite often you will be transferring money around between bank accounts in different companies. Maybe you've got excess funds in one company that you want to transfer to another. Traditionally, it's never allowed you to transfer money between bank accounts in different companies. That feature is now there. There's been improvements made to the setup as well. So there's a single page now you can go to and do all the various bits of setup for the intercompany. And this includes diagnostics. So there are now little fact boxes. So it checks the configuration as you're setting it up. And if it spots an issue with the setup, it will then show you on one of these queues that there are issues. You can then drill down on them, see what the issues are, and fix them on the fly. There's an improved inbox and outbox experience, so you can easily see handled transactions, and there's also been queues added to the role center, as you can see in the bottom right there. So there are now simple queues you can go to see transactions that are pending that you need to deal with that have come across from other companies. They've also added journal approval. So the approvals functionality has been in Business Central for absolutely years, but the general journal approvals that were introduced a few years back wasn't covering the intercompany journals. That's now been extended, so if you've got general journal approvals turned on, it will now work with intercompany journals as well. The next piece is the multi-environment. So if you have multiple databases in Business Central, so potentially you've got a database in the UK, a database in France, a database in Germany, for instance, you can now set up links between them to transfer data around. So this uses API. So API stands for Application Programming Interface, and it's effectively just a way in which the different systems will talk to each other. So this allows you in one company to set it up to say that you want to be able to expose its data, and then in the other company you can hook into that data. This allows you to both transfer transactions, so sales, purchases, bank transactions, for instance, between those different environments, but it also can be used with consolidation. So if you use consolidation, if everything was in one database previously, it was easy to transfer data around, but if you were in separate databases, you had to export files, move them around, import them, whereas now the two systems can talk directly to each other. So that's a great improvement from a security perspective and also from a process perspective as well. The last piece I want to cover in the intercompany, multi-company area is synchronization of master data. So I'm sure a lot of you, if you have multiple companies, particularly if you work with things like stock, which is across multiple companies, or if you have customers that are consistent across different companies, find it difficult to keep the data in sync between company 1, 2 and 3. So this new functionality allows you to set up like a master company which will pass data onto additional companies in your setup. So any changes you make are pulled from the master company. It's not a two-way update, so you need to be conscious of that. It basically just pushes in a single direction, and you can tell the system whether you want to validate the changes. So if you change, for instance, a country code, do you want the change in that country code to trigger something different to happen in the system? You can also specify if you want to overwrite any local changes. This means that master data from the master company might be pushed down to company 1, but you might change something there, and if you changed it, you can dictate whether you want future updates to overwrite that or not. You can also filter on records, so it might be, for instance, that you want to synchronize down all customers from the master company that are for a particular country or for a particular customer price group or anything else you might want to filter on, and you can just pass a subset of that data down from the master company to each of the individual sub companies. So again, I think that's a big improvement, and it just helps you maintain consistency across multiple companies that you might manage. The next area we're going to cover is inventory. So there are a few key bits I want to cover. New AI generated product descriptions within Business Central, the extension to the preview posting functionality, the ability to undo transfer shipments, extension of the over receipts functionality, and improvements to reservations. So the first of these is AI generated product descriptions. So there's been a lot of talk about AI in the last year. Obviously, ChatGPT exploded on the scene, I think, just before Christmas last year. And Microsoft are quite heavily backing some of the OpenAI functionality, and they're starting to incorporate it within their products. The name they're giving this is Copilot. So when you look at Microsoft 365, when you look at Business Central, Dynamics Sales, etc., you'll start seeing Copilot boxes appearing. The first one that's appeared in Business Central is the AI marketing text generation functionality. This allows you to create marketing style text for a product that you can then utilize elsewhere. So for instance, if you've got Shopify enabled and integrated Business Central, you can then generate a marketing description for the item and then synchronize it up to your Shopify account. It's currently in preview, so it might change, might be tweaked a little bit, but it's there, and if you're on version 23, then you should be able to start using this now. So let's have a quick look at the functionality in action. Here we are on an item card. So this is the Athens desk, and if I scroll down, you can see in the fact box here, there's now this new marketing text box, which is the Copilot box they've added to the item card. If I click on edit, we get a box pops up and it gives us a number of parameters that we can change. The first one we'll look at is the attributes. If I click in here, you can see a list of all the attributes for this particular item that are in Business Central, and the system will use this to help generate the marketing text. I'm going to untick the depth, height and width parameters because I'm not particularly interested in those, so I can turn those off. You can also decide what kind of text you like for it to create, just a tagline or a paragraph or both, or a whole brief. We're going to specify tagline for now and ask it to create a draft. And there we have its first iteration. So reach new heights of productivity with the Athens desk, a solid oak masterpiece that blends elegance and functionality, making work feel like a walk in the park. Very grandiose. Maybe we don't like it. We could ask it to generate another one for us. Unleash your productivity with the Athens desk, and so on. You can keep on asking it to regenerate. There are also a series of additional settings. So under more settings here, we could say we want to emphasize a particular quality. We want to make it sound reliable, and the tone of voice will be upbeat. And once done that, we can then ask it to regenerate the text for us. Get your work groove on with the Athens desk, a solid oak stunner that's as reliable as your morning coffee. So you can change and tweak the way in which it creates it. And determine what additional pieces of information you want to be included when it generates this. It's a nice little feature. It can be used in conjunction with Shopify, for instance. So if you've got the Shopify connector in place, you can use this to generate the extended text for your item, which then goes up to the Shopify thing. In the future, this functionality is going to be extended in many other ways throughout the system. This is almost like a little pilot idea, or co-pilot idea if you like, just to get a feel for how they could use it in Business Central. Now let's go back and have a look at some of the other new inventory features. If you regularly post documents in Business Central, then you're probably familiar with the preview posting functionality that's been there for a number of years. They've now extended this functionality to over 20 new additional journals and documents, and there's a list of some of the key ones there on the left hand side, so inventory picks and putaways, warehouse shipments, transfer orders, etc. Most of them are around the inventory area of the system. The preview posting allows you to see and correct any errors prior to posting, so it will give you warnings if there's something wrong and also show you the transactions that are going to be created. So it will show you the item ledger entries, the value entries, the GL entries, and if you're using warehousing, the warehousing entries that will be created when you post that particular document or journal. The new undo transfer shipments feature allows you to, unsurprisingly, undo a shipment from a transfer order. But it's worth noting you can only undo the shipment if you haven't yet received those goods that you've shipped. So obviously a transfer order has two parts. You ship the goods first of all, then you receive them into your next location. So you can only undo it if you've not yet received it. When you undo the shipment, it creates an additional line on the posted shipment to say that it's been corrected, so it gives you a negative line to undo that value, and it corrects the value on the initial transfer order to show that it's not been shipped yet. There's also a tick box on the lines to show that they are corrective lines. The over receipt functionality has been in the system for a couple of versions now, but previously it only worked with warehouse putaways. This has now been extended to include inventory putaways, which means you can use it in both different scenarios. So simply you set up an over receipt tolerance, and then when you go to receipt goods, you can have a tolerance associated with those items that allows you to over receipt by a particular percentage, for instance. You can also associate approval workflows with this, so that if you have an over receipt, it needs to go through an approval process prior to being posted. It's also worth noting, though, that it doesn't handle the additional financial implications. So if you are receiving 12 items rather than 10, you need to work out financially how you are handling those additional 2 items. Are you decreasing the overall unit cost so the value for the line is the same? Are you increasing the value of the line to reflect the fact you've got 2 additional items? You just need to make sure that you've got a process in place to handle it. But what it does do is it assists the warehousing team when they receive more goods at the door than they're expecting. The last part in this inventory area is sort of reservation improvements. So I'll give you a quick overview on the slide, and then we're going to jump into the system and have a little look in the system at this. So it's been designed to assist you with the process of shipping goods out of the door. So if you use reservations, there is now a reservation worksheet to allow you to go through and carry out bulk reservations against a number of documents at the same time. So it's very handy if, for instance, you've got a lot of orders in the system, you've received goods in, you need to reserve those orders against the stock that's been received. You also got better visibility in the system, so you can see on a sales document whether it's been fully or partially reserved. And there's also an existing feature which kind of fits in with this process that allows you to update quantities to ship on sales documents to reflect the reserved quantities. So all in all, these parts help you decide better when you should be processing your sales orders and shipping them out of the door. So let's go and have a little look in the system at this. We're here in a sales order for Tray Research where I've added an item, the Amsterdam lamp, and asked for a quantity of 6 from the East location code. Currently, there is no reserved quantity and the quantity to ship is blank as well. If we look across at the fact box over here, you can see the sales line details fact box, and down the bottom there's a new field called reserve from stock, and it shows whether the line has been reserved from stock fully or partially. So this is none currently, we have no reservations at all. You can also look at it from an order level. So from the order statistics page, on the general tab, there's also an overall reserve from stock that looks across all the lines on the order. Now we're going to go to the reservation worksheet. This is a new page that allows you to bulk reserve items. There are a number of batches, so you can set up different batches with different parameters. At the moment I'm in the default batch, and if I say get demand, it will go off and it will give me all different transaction types. So we've got a list there of sales orders, transfer orders and jobs that have requirements for stock. And in this you can see quantities that are required, whether they've been reserved, and the available quantities to reserve. I've also set up an additional batch which is called sales week, and if we have a quick look at that, we can see that this is only going to look at sales orders, and it has an end date formula. So this is how far in advance it will look for documents that it needs to reserve against. So in this case, it'll look for any sales orders that are due to be shipped in the next week and pull those through. So let's go and select that batch, get demand, and you can see that it's pulled through 2 different sales orders, one of which is my sales order for the Amsterdam lamp. On here I can then ask it to allocate. There are a number of pieces of logic behind this that will determine how it's going to allocate, but we'll just run it for this one. And we can see here that it's now suggesting that it's got 6 that it can reserve, and there's still 4 left over because I had 10 in stock. And I can now reserve this stock in the system. So we click on make reservation, and when you make the reservations you have the option to determine what kind of demand you wish to reserve. We're doing sales orders at the moment, so we could change it to sales orders or leave it on all, and it will reserve everything that's in this particular batch. So I say OK. The order that I had for 6 is now gone because that was fully reserved, and off it goes. It leaves the other line behind though because it wasn't able to reserve it because it didn't have the full allocation. So let's go back and have a look at what that's done to the sales order. If we go to the sales order in here and scroll down, we can see on the line here for the quantity of 6 that we now have a reserved quantity of 6. However, we don't have a quantity to ship filled out yet, which means we won't be able to create a inventory pick or put away. So this is a setting on the sales receivable setup which is set so it doesn't fill it in by default, which helps if you're using reservations. So there's a way to get that value to fill in. There's a report called the Sales Reservation Availability Report. And when you run this report, you can ask it to modify the quantity to ship in the sales order lines. When we run the report, it runs through any orders that have reserved quantity against them and also have that stock available in the warehouse to ship, and it will update the quantity to ship on the line. So we'll just preview that. We don't look at the detail of the report, but if we then refresh this page here, we can see that the quantity to ship has now been filled out with 6. So this order has now been reserved. It's got a quantity to ship, and if I want to, I can go off and create the inventory pick. It's also worth noting that when you create inventory picks and warehouse picks as well, there's now an option on there to say whether you want to pick things that have been fully and partially reserved from stock or that are fully reserved from stock. So in this case, it means you are only picking those sales orders that you know you've got all the stock in place for and are fully reserved as well. So that's that new feature. I think that's going to help a lot with determining what sales orders your warehouse needs to deal with at any given time. The final section I want to cover today is warehousing. So Microsoft have very much focused on improving the inventory and warehousing functionality in Business Central. And across the 2 release waves this year, there have been a number of improvements to allow a smoother process flow, and the use of existing features and functions in different scenarios have been improved to allow better visibility of information and, as I said, a better flow through the system for those people that are using it. So the first area we're going to cover is usability improvements. So this is 4 key areas I'm focusing on this. I'm going to flip into Business Central and give you a quick walkthrough of these 4 points. I'm here in the item journal. One of the first changes I want to show you is very, very minor, but in the drop down from the bin code, they've now included the description field. Small point, but it means that you can put additional information in against a bin, and then people, when they're selecting a bin, both in the item journal and elsewhere in the system, can easily see if there is something they need to know about that bin, such as this bin is broken. But I'm going to select the first bin. The second improvement is to do with item tracking lines. Again, it's very minor, but if I fill in the lot number here, and then go to leave the page, it warns me that I've not filled in a quantity. This might not be a major thing, but if you leave the page and then go to post it, you'll get an error message. You need to decipher what the error message says, come back into the page, make the amendment, and then go through the process again. So I now know that, okay, I need to fill in a quantity base 10, and I can then close that. Brilliant. The next change is similarly a very quick, simple one. So historically, you've been able to see bin contents from an item journal, but you've not been able to bring the bin contents through. There's now the capability to pull the bin contents through from the warehouse entries into the item journal. So if we go to Actions, Functions, Get Bin Content, I want to bring through from the location code for a particular item. We can use this item again if we want. Whole roasted beans, say OK to that. It then pulls through, funnily enough, the same value here, but it brings through those 10 from that bin in the warehouse. So they're minor little things, but they help ease the process through. The last piece I want to show is on the transfer orders. So this is the ability to explode bombs. We'll go to transfer orders and then open this transfer order here. And this item, the conference bundle, is a assembly bill of materials. This new function allows you to now explode the assembly bill of materials on a transfer order. The one thing to be aware of when you do this is that, as it says here, it won't bring through non-item lines. Because it's a transfer order, if you have any resource time allocated on an assembly bomb, it won't put it through the transfer order. But we say yes, ask me about the dimensions, and then it explodes that out and it pulls through the individual components that I need to transfer to my other warehouse. So they're very quick, simple things, but they go some way to improving small gaps throughout the system. The availability overview screen is a new screen that appears when you have advanced warehousing turned on. So that's the directed picks and putaways on a particular location. And when you go through and create a pick from a warehouse shipment, it brings up a screen that tells you what it's created, so how many pick lines it's created. And it also gives you a bit of an explanation about why it's determined those particular values that you can pick. So there's a summary there on the right hand side that you can see, which is from one which I've created. But let's have a quick look at it in Business Central. We're in the sales order list, and I've got a couple of sales orders in my system for the same product from the white location. I'm going to go into the second one, which I've got for 10 items. Now these items here aren't reserved, so I've got no reserve quantity against it, but I want to go through and ship them. So I create a warehouse shipment. Once it's been created, I can then go off and ask the system to create a pick for me. When it comes to the create pick page, there's now this new action down here called show summary. So this is, as it says, just for directed putaways and picks. If I turn that on and then click OK, it will go off and it will create me the warehouse picks. And then it tells me what it's created. So here I can see it's created me a pick line for that particular sales order. And over on the right hand side, it gives me an idea about why it's given me those values. So I've asked for 10, but it's only given me 5. We can see that we've got a pickable quantity of 20. And if we carry on down this list, we can see here that we've got a total reserve quantity in the warehouse of 15, which aren't reserved on this order. That's a different order they're reserved on. And because they're reserved, they have got priority for the picking process. So therefore, we've got 20 minus the impact of 15, leaving us with just 5 that we can handle. So it makes it simpler to understand why you've not been able to pick the full quantity of that particular item. The next thing I want to cover is the create inventory documents. So this is when you are creating inventory picks and putaways from source documents such as sales, purchase orders and transfer orders. When you create them, you now get a number of additional filters. So you can see on the bottom left side of this screenshot here, there are a number of additional filters. So you can filter on job numbers, on item numbers, on date filters. It means that if you've got a source document with a large number of lines, or say a job with a large number of planning lines on it, which are on a purchase order, you no longer have to create the inventory document for all of the lines and then delete them. You can actually filter it and create the lines specifically for those elements that you require. This is a very complicated topic, so I'm not going to go into any detail particularly, but effectively you can now have simple advanced warehousing. So there are a number of features that were previously only available with advanced warehousing, which is when you've got the directed picks and putaways selected on a location. What Microsoft have done is they've now broken these out, so individual elements can now be used without having directed picks and putaways. So that includes warehouse zones, movement worksheets, calculation of bin replenishment, bin capacity, warehouse classes and special equipment. This means that in simpler scenarios where you're only using, for instance, inventory picks and putaways, you can have a lot of the additional functionality to make your warehouse much more proficient. The last point I want to cover is the ability to ship and receive non-inventory items. This is something which we are constantly asked for. So for instance, where you have a document, it's a sales order or purchase order, and you have additional lines on it that aren't stock lines. So you might have a line for delivery fees or custom charges sitting on that particular document. Once it gets to the warehouse can only receive and potentially receive an invoice the lines that are to do with stock. This then leaves behind the original document with the unshipped and uninvoiced line on it for shipping fees or custom charges, whatever it might be. So there's now new functionality that allows you to determine in which scenarios you wish to post those additional lines from the warehouse function. We'll have a quick look in Business Central to see how this works. We're in the purchase and payables setup, and there's a new field here called Auto Post Non-Inventory via Warehouse. Currently it's set to all, but we're going to change it to be attached and assigned. If it's set to all, it will post any non-inventory lines when you post the warehousing document. If it's set to attached and assigned, you have to then tell it which lines you want to post based on which stock lines you are receiving or shipping. We then have here a purchase order for Wide World Importers, which has a line on for whole roasted beans from Colombia, and we're receiving 100 of those into our silver warehouse. We also have a line which is a GL account line for postal fees, and there's one line of that at $4.99. Currently these lines aren't associated with each other, so on the functions action there is an attached inventory option where you can then tell it which line you wish to associate that GL account line for the postal fees to. So we're going to associate it with the line for the whole beans, and then we're going to go off and create an inventory put away. We'll then go and have a look at the document that's been created. So we navigate to our inventory put away. You can see on the inventory put away here that we now have a quantity of 100. We're going to say that we're handing all 100 of those. We're happy with the bin it's selected, and then we're going to go and post the document. It's also worth noting that from one of the earlier features, I've set this up so for the purchase orders, it's mandatory to receipt and invoice. So there's no option there to select which one I want to do. I'm going to post the receipt and the invoice. That's now completed, and the order's gone. It's now finished. So it's now receipted the stock and it's posted the postal fees on the same order as well. So that's the last of the features that have come out in the last two release waves. There are also a number of features that are on the verge of being released. They may come out in the incremental releases over the coming months, and also will be coming out in the release waves next year. Myself and a couple of my colleagues were in Directions in Lyon a couple of weeks back, and Microsoft are announcing some of the great things that are coming forward. So I thought I'd just quickly highlight a couple of those so that we can look into them in April in our next webinar. We've got eDocuments. So eDocuments is an electronic form of distributing documentation between companies, so sales and purchase orders. This initially will cover sales orders, invoices, credit memos, and purchase orders, invoices, and credit memos. It's a way for data to be passed electronically via XML files, so not the traditional PDFs or paper type documents, actually data you're passing between your systems. It's becoming increasingly common, particularly within the EU and when dealing with government organisations in the UK. So that's coming soon. It's going to be a global framework that Microsoft put into the core products, but then there'll be localizations for each country, verticalizations for particular industries, and then different format providers that will come in place as well. And that's going to be an incremental release over the next year or so. There's also Copilot, so AI is being extended in the system and throughout most Microsoft products. The next step that's coming to is bank account reconciliation. This should be coming out in one of the incremental releases over the next month or two, whereby the AI will assist you in reconciling your bank accounts and will suggest best matches. And then it will take what it's learnt and will allow you to implement them as new rules within the reconciliation functionality in Business Central. There's also improvements coming to reporting within Business Central. So they are bringing out, I think it's something like 37 new Excel layouts over the next released wave or two. So there'll be new layouts coming out in Excel to allow you to quickly produce reports that contain data from your Business Central system and charts then based on those reports as well. There'll undoubtedly be lots of other new features and functions coming out in the next year. There's a couple of the bits that we're aware of and we know are coming soon. So that's the end of my presentation. If there are any questions that have been asked during the session, or if you want to pop one in very quickly now, we'll try and answer them. If not, we will respond to you if you leave your name via email or with a quick call afterwards. If you want some of these features and functions and you're not on the latest version, contact us, talk to myself, Catherine or Tom, or one of the consultants that you're dealing with, or email inquiries at d-c.co.uk. And we can talk to you about an upgrade to get you on the latest version. It's also worthwhile remembering, as I said earlier, that some of these features, whilst they're in your system, need to be enabled through feature management. I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope it's been useful, and I will speak to you next time. Thank you.